Muy buenas tardes, sean todos bienvenidos a esta rueda de prensa de presentación del acto inaugural del Festival Cultural de Mayo con su edición número 25. Esta es la rueda de prensa número 25 de la inauguración del festival. Es increíble y bueno, pues qué mejor que inaugurar este festival con una obra, yo diría, well, I'm going to speak in English, but I'm going to say it in Spanish and then I will translate it.
That's good.
Yo diría que es una obra de la pospandemia. Hemos hablado mucho de qué sucedió en estos 2 años con el tema que a todo el mundo apremió del COVID-19 y me parece que una muestra clara de cómo impulsar todo este sentimiento en torno a los puntos que nos aquejan como seres humanos se resumen de forma muy puntual y muy bella y muy bien armada, casi diría yo perfectamente armada, en lo que consideramos como festival una producción de la pospandemia, que incluye, por supuesto, varias disciplinas artísticas. Ya entrará la maestra Brassard en tema, pero bueno, pues tendremos música, tendremos video, cine, por supuesto poesía, una exposición de, digamos, de elementos visuales de la más alta calidad, lo que nos llena de orgullo porque entonces todos los elementos humanos, tecnológicos y de contenido están en esta puesta en escena. Entonces, bien, antes de pasar, pues sí, efectivamente decidimos en el Festival Cultural de Mayo en sus 25 años arrancar con Quebec, quien ha sido un aliado fundamental desde que tuvimos a Quebec como invitado de honor en el 2012 y que vino en aquel entonces la delegación de artistas de Quebec más numerosa que ha venido a nuestro país. Desde entonces esta colaboración, entonces para nosotros el hecho de abrir con Quebec es un verdadero honor y con la obra de la maestra Brassard. Well, I don't know if I will have the time to translate everything.
It's okay. I kind of understand the major thing I think that you said. Yeah.
Okay.
I cannot speak Spanish, unfortunately, but I can understand a little bit. Yeah.
Muy bien, pues la puesta en escena es el día 7, 8:30 de la noche, 12:30 del día el domingo, una puesta en escena hablada al inglés, traducida al español, va a haber subtítulos. Y bueno, pues no se la pierdan y le paso el micrófono a la maestra Brassard. Bienvenida.
Thank you. Well, first, I just want to say publicly how much I am very, very happy and honored to be here. And it's really an honor for me and for my team to be able to perform in this sanctuary and this emblematic theater in the heart of Guadalajara. So I want to thank Sergio, who has been working so hard with us for us to finally be able to bring the show here. Well, we are just hopefully getting out of this era of the pandemic. And unfortunately, we live in a world that is plagued by a lot of catastrophes, like wars and everything. So I started to devise this show called Violence a few years ago. So it was before the pandemic hit. And it was inspired by a sentence that my goddaughter Leon said, a little girl. She was 2 years and a half then. And I brought a book for her from Japan, and there were drawings of landscape, and she showed a little dot in the sky of the drawing, and she said, look, it looks like a small Japanese flower that hasn't been born yet. And I was extremely touched by this sentence, and from that sentence of a child, I decided to do a very elaborated piece where I am talking about violence, but insidious violence. The violence that you don't always see, the violence that we suffer even as a little kid. And as time goes by, the theme that we are talking about in the piece are becoming more and more relevant, and they find their echo in all aspects of our life of today. I am working, as Sergio mentioned, I'm working with different artists from different disciplines. So I'm working with visual artists, with musicians, with video artists, with film artists. There's a lot of sound in my work, which is like wonderful that we are in this incredible sanctuary of, you know, sound. We cannot find a better place. And this time, in order to really honor the sentence that Leon has said to its fullest, I really wanted to honor the thought of a little child. I decided to make a collaboration with Japanese artists in Japan. So what we will show here, because of the circumstances, we were supposed to go, all the team, and spend some time in Japan and to work with the Japanese artists in Japan. Because of the pandemic, we couldn't go, but we decided to do the show anyway. So half of the piece has been devised in the distance, working in the distance with Japanese artists who were in Tokyo and then on the seaside of the Japan Sea in a small village. So they cannot be there with us in person, but they are with us there in beautiful films that have been shot in the Japan Sea. Yeah.
Qué emoción. La verdad es de que I'm very excited about what's going to happen. Muy emocionado. Como podrán ver, pues somos dos personas presentando el festival. Esto nos sucedió cuando tuvimos, y hablo un poco atrás, después de 25 años, cuando el Reino Unido nos escogió para el año dual entre Reino Unido y México, el festival multidisciplinario que formó parte de esto, pues fue el Festival Cultural de Mayo, y inauguramos en aquel entonces con un one-man show, como es el que vamos a ver esto. Pero no es un one-man show, o sea, de una sola persona, porque atrás está todo lo que no se ve, ¿no? Pero que sí se ve enfrente. Entonces creo que eso es mucho de lo que también hay que revalorizar en esta época de la pospandemia, y es empezar a poner más atención en toda este increíble cúmulo de talento que existe para que la persona, digamos, la persona del frente esté llevando toda la ruta durante 1 hora y 40 que durará el espectáculo, ¿no? Entonces son muchos técnicos, un número importante de personas que están trabajando backstage para que esto se dé. Entonces, y para que precisamente, and precisely, the poetry, it's very important to mention. You didn't mention yourself,
Yeah.
So, but I have to mention her. She's the total creator, who put down and put together all this enormous amount of effort and to visualize, this sentence that you just mentioned.
Thank you so
Thank you very much
much.
for that.
Thank you.
Please tell us about the text.
Yeah, so when I was working, as I was working on the piece, a few years ago, I found myself in Tokyo, and I went to a museum of art that's called the Mori Art Museum. It's a beautiful museum in the heart of Tokyo on the 53rd floor of a building. It's a gorgeous place, and they had organized there an exhibition called Catastrophe and the Power of Art. What art can do in time of catastrophes. And I was totally stunned when I saw this exhibition, and actually it was the turning point for me, where I started to realize what my piece was talking about. And what they had done in this exhibition is that they asked many different artists to do a work around, inspired by all the tragedies that the Japanese people had to go through throughout their history. So meaning earthquakes and like destructions and wars and tsunamis and everything, and the resilience of the Japanese people. And there was one of the first work of art had been created by a German artist, and it was called Collapse. And it was staging the collapsing of a building in the museum, reproduced that with all the pieces that exploded and fell to the ground. And you could still see the traces of people who used to live in that building. And I thought it was a very moving piece. And at the same time, when I came back to my hotel, it was in the news everywhere that buildings had collapsed in the heart of Marseille, the city of Marseille in France, in a poor neighborhood. This building had collapsed, and it echoed so precisely what I had seen in the museum. And I started thinking, we are all connected by this. We are all connected. When a tragedy happened in one part of the world, we feel it. It's like the wave of humanity that vibrates inside of us. So we are all concerned. We are concerned by the war. I'm sure that many people now are still very emotional about what we are seeing in Ukraine right now. And all this echoes in us, the pandemic. I am very moved to come here and to see in person, to realize that you have all been through what we have been through at the same time. So the piece, I wanted to start with this idea that was expressed by a little child, but to do really a show for adults, for us to reflect upon the cruelty and the possible catastrophe and how we can cope with that by finding in ourselves the most profound roots of our humanity. So it's not a dark piece, it's a dark piece, but that leads to the light. It's a dark piece that leads to something beautiful in the end, I hope. And the reason why I call it violence, because it's surprising since it comes from a child. At one point I was thinking, when you are little children, you are often saying these kind of sentences. I'm sure you know little kids who are saying extraordinary things. They are very little, then just begin to talk, and they say things that are filled with poetry, and they are profound and philosophical and so human. And then you have the feeling as if they were coming from another planet, as if they had come here with all this knowledge of what life is, what the universe is, and usually, I mean, it makes us smile. We think, oh, they are very cute, and then we are working towards having them being educated in order to become decent human beings. But by doing so, it's as if we were sending them the message that they are not adequate human beings yet. Although they have legs, they have heart, they have a head, they have, you know, their feelings, and they have their visions and their intelligence and the profound substance of their own unique being. And so I thought maybe it's the first sort of violence that we are being subjected as little kids. And when sometimes we have the blues, or we are scared in life, or it doesn't go well, maybe it's because somehow we are trying to reconnect to that knowledge that we had when we entered the world. So my show, it talks about that, but it's very, as Sergio mentioned, it's very poetic, so it's not a didactic piece. It's really surreal and poetic, but by creating and putting together all these scenes and the aspect of the piece, like the images, the films, the music and all that, I reflected upon all these topics and subjects, and I asked myself that question, what art can do in time of catastrophe, when things are not doing so well. And that's why for me, it is extremely moving and important that we could travel here. It was not easy, but we made it. And we are here, and we're going to do a show in front of people in reality, in the realness, and together we are asking that question together, what art can do in time of catastrophe.
Thank you, Marie. Bueno, lo que acaba de decir la maestra es, no pudo haber sido más perfecto para el contenido general del festival en su programación completa. Es un festival en el que venimos de la pandemia, es la primera función, this is going to be the first opening with a 100% capacity. Es la primera vez, el primer evento al 100%. Es un festival que en todos sus segmentos viene mucho de lo que la maestra dijo, el segmento, por ejemplo, de las plazas públicas como el Paso Perrón, todos los artistas que participan en el festival, la forma en la que fueron seleccionados y por qué, con sus repertorios, con mucho cuidado, analicen cómo es que se armaron todos los programas del final del festival, en donde tenemos obras de Tchaikovsky, obras de Rimsky-Korsakov, obras de un polaco, Kilar, un ucraniano tocando, un japonés dirigiendo, los mexicanos tocando, en fin, queda claro que la comunicación a través del arte es sin lugar a dudas la más efectiva y que tiene que ver con pues lo que somos como seres humanos. You want to say? ¿Alguna pregunta? Lo estamos grabando, te podemos pasar. Ella está haciendo una reflexión principalmente de que pues todo vino, voy a resumirlo, quizás no con sus mismas palabras en una traducción profunda, por lo que de una palabra de un niño japonés que apenas hablaba y que la movió a de alguna manera hacer toda esta estructura. Está hablando de esa violencia no tal como la vemos, sino una violencia en otros sentidos más profundos. En fin, creo que el enfoque es más, a mí me sorprende escuchar lo que la maestra está diciendo, porque si bien se titula violencia, quizás es una violencia vista desde otro punto de vista más hacia adentro, ¿no? O sea, hay muchos tipos de violencia, ¿no? Entonces yo creo que es una buena oportunidad para darnos cuenta que quizás bueno, ya lo estoy abonando yo, que la violencia tal como la conocemos o como dice su título, existen otros puntos del desarrollo y la correlación entre seres humanos, ¿no? Y yo creo que la poesía, yo creo que las artes y toda la puesta en escena de alguna manera va a ser increíblemente efectiva para provocar en quienes vengan este mensaje que ella quiere dar, ¿no? Más o menos, es lo que entendí. Bueno, hay varias. How many people are on stage? There's 3 musicians, plus you.
There's on stage. There's one musician and me, and in the film there's a Japanese dancer and a Japanese actress. But off stage we have as well a video person, a sound person, a musician, a technician. So we have quite a big team. The set designer. That it's really I'm acting like a bit of a company. So everyone is there with me, traveling with me all the time. So, and our production director is with us, and so it's almost like a family. So we are 10 people working together, traveling together.
Sí, son ella, un músico, 2 bailarines japoneses que van a estar en video. Backstage son otras 6 o 7 gentes que vienen como parte del equipo técnico. Esto es todos los proyectores, las pantallas, todo el cableado, todo el tema sorprendente de las conexiones y los códigos de internet. Por cierto, by the way, the internet is very good at this venue, so don't worry. Entonces, todo esto que se está planteando más, por supuesto, además del personal del festival, que son otros 4 o 5, son 15 más el personal de teatro, son 25. Estamos hablando de unas 30 personas que participan en toda la operación de front y back, ¿no? Por supuesto, falta toda la operación que tiene que ver con camerinos y tiene que ver con el flujo de las gentes y todo lo que es front. Entonces yo calculo que sí tenemos 50 personas operando todo el espectáculo front y back y on stage, ¿no? En el escenario.
Hablaban como de diferentes tipos de violencia, pero si nos pudieran decir como, no sé, como de qué va el espectáculo, o sea, qué historia es como la que cuenta.
Yeah, she wants to know, about this issue that you mentioned, that there is not just this type of violence that we know, the other type of violence, and how do you, she wants to know about this other type of.
Yeah. I'm talking in a way, it's not obvious in the piece, but it ends with an anecdote that I'm telling to the audience. For me, the whole piece is being seen from a point of view of someone who suffered violence. So, and it's not a story that you can follow in a very normal sense. But for me, things that are being evoked there, for example, this tragedy in Marseille that happened years ago. This building collapsed and people died in it. The reason why this happened is because there are people, for example, real estate developer who are buying buildings in order to make money. And they are buying buildings everywhere, and they don't take care of the buildings. In French, there's a beautiful expression, they call them marchands de sommeil, which seems they are sleep seller or something like that, or death seller. It's because they are having these buildings that are dilapidated and not proper for human to live there. But they do in order to gain money, and they take advantage of poor people or immigrants or people who arrive there don't have the money, so they go there because the rent is cheap. But for me, this is an insidious violence, something that is not obvious, but that is really like so present. And as well, all the sort of different type of violence, like racism and violence against women and violence against children, the war, what we're seeing now, violence in the language, violence in the ideas that we are exchanging, like on the social media, for example. So it's this violence that is not necessarily violence with a gun or with a machete, but it's a violence that is crawling into your brain in such an intelligent and insidious manner that at one point you can become an abuser yourself without knowing it. And what happens now in Ukraine, it touches us because somehow their society is a bit similar to ours, so we are even more touched than we are like usual with all these conflicts that are happening all the time, all over the world. It's a bit difficult to understand that I could come into your house one day with a gun and kill you, and we would not be extraterrestrial, we would just be normal human being, but we have been brought to think that we are doing the right thing by eliminating others or by being violent about others. So it takes this idea of violence can be expressed in so many different shades. And in a way, the piece I'm doing, like inspired still by the words of this little human, she's just arriving in the world. For us, it might be the end of the world. For her, it's the beginning. And I want to appeal to the humanity that we have in all of us in order to try together, now that we are almost over with this pandemic thing, to try together to imagine solution. How can we live by using as a tool our humanity and our fraternity and our concern about how can we care for one another. And I think art is a nice tool because it brings people to see things in a different manner, the way little children see things when they are being born and they arrive into our world.
Muchas gracias, les agradezco muchísimo. Creo que es una muy bonita forma de terminar esta rueda de prensa. Y bueno, pues no se pierdan, el espectáculo realmente es de lo más demandante e importante que hemos presentado en 25 años, tanto como producción, en su contenido, en su mensaje. Creo que es una increíble, o sea, no pudimos festejar esta reapertura al 100% y 25 años del festival de mejor forma. Muchas gracias y nos vemos el sábado y el domingo. Gracias.
Thank you. Gracias.